Legal is really tricky and it's difficult for when you're first starting out. And I'll give you an example of my first deal. Hello and welcome. My name is Gino Barbaro, one of the co-founders of Jake and Gino. And in this how-to lesson, I'm going to be discussing the 3 phases of due diligence. So if you're looking to get into your first deal or your next deal, do you have a checklist as far as due diligence requirements? What are you looking for in the deal? If you don't have one, or if you want to have one that's really complete, I want you to listen on. Now, one of my biggest mistakes when I started out investing years ago, it was due diligence. That was, how can I describe it? Maybe a linchpin. I thought just buy a deal, take it over, not worry about it. Well, due diligence are probably 2 of the most important words in investing. Trust, but verify. So important, but due diligence. What do you need to be looking for? Now, let's break due diligence down into 3 steps. So it's a lot easier for you to understand and what parts to tackle first and which ones should you really focus on. There's 3 aspects. I want you to write these 3 down. The first one is financial due diligence. The second one is the physical due diligence. And the third one is the legal due diligence. I actually had a conversation with someone on Bigger Pockets the other day, and I had a post on due diligence, and the gentleman reached out to me and said, I don't really want to sweat the small stuff. With that kind of attitude, very similar to what I had, the small stuff can be really big stuff. And what's for you to say what's small versus what's big when you're starting out? Is legal more important than physical? Is financial more important than legal? Take them all in their totality and make them equals and understand. Now, once you create this checklist, it's so easy because you can follow the yellow brick road. Now, I've created the checklist. I can't go through all of the details and all of what we're looking for in due diligence. If you want a copy, email me, gino@jakeandgino.com, and I'll send you our due diligence doc and our checklist of what we look for during our due diligence. Now, the financial due diligence, you're excited. You've just closed the deal. Now the work begins. Typically, after you sign the contract, you have 30 days to complete due diligence. Depending on the market cycle, if the market's really hot, they may only give you 15 days. And sometimes your earnest money goes hard day one. Wouldn't really recommend that for anybody who's starting out, but if you've been in the business for years and years and years, and you've already done your due diligence, you've already walked the property, you've already looked at the financials, you already understand what you're buying, it's riskier. But if there's competition out there, you may have to do that. My recommendation to you is make sure you have this list, and in the contract, you state that you do not start your due diligence period until you've received all of the documents. Financial due diligence is so important because before you go and do the second one, which is physical, you want to jump out there, you want to get your inspector, you want to look at the property. Oh, hold on. You don't want to spend any money on that until you can verify what you've received. And it's really interesting. Over the last couple of years, I think financial due diligence had to go by the wayside because a lot of these deals didn't make sense. People had to use bridge debt on stabilized deals. So really, who cared about the financial due diligence? But now, as the market cycle starts to shift back a little bit, guess what? We're getting back to, I think, a point of sanity. Get all the documents. Now, what are some of the documents you need? You need a T12. You need a rent roll. You need bank statements. I would also ask for what are the CapEx budgets for the last 3 years, right? That's so important. I can't list them here all again, but at the very least, what you're trying to accomplish in financial due diligence is if the landlord told you that he's collecting $10,000 a month in rents, let's verify that. And then all of a sudden, if you've seen that, oh, you know what, it really wasn't 10,000, it was 8,000. And you told me that occupancy was at 94%, but it's really 72%. Well, financial due diligence is where you say, stop, I'm not going to inspect this property. You have 2 choices. You can either say, I'm out, this is not going to make sense to me, or you can go back to the seller and what we call either a retrade, which was a sin a couple of years ago, or it's a concession. You told me A, it's B. I don't know if you lied or you misspoke or you really didn't know your numbers. That's not for me to decide. But I know that I can't get the deal done at this price point because I thought that the financials were this and now they're this. couple of years ago, you would have had to take them if you were really desperate for a deal. Now there's more financial, I don't want to call it haggling, but you told me the rent was 10 grand a month and now it's only 8 grand a month. And now all of a sudden I see all these delinquencies on the rent roll where you have, residents that are 3 months behind. When I take that property over, they're walking. I'm going to have vacancies, which may be a good thing, but it's also a bad thing. So understand that financial due diligence is the first part. Now, after you're satisfied or after you've jumped that hurdle, now let's start looking at the physical due diligence. Very different from when you're doing your first deal to what Jake and I actually do right now. At the very least, you need to hire an inspector. And if you have a 10-unit property or a 150-unit property, in my opinion, you need to have them walk every single unit. It may sound crazy, it may sound like overkill, but if they only show you the units they want to show you on, let's say, a 30-unit property, they only show you 10 of the units, well, what's going on with the 20 they're not showing you? Are they cannibalizing those units? Are those units completely down? Is there mold in those units? It doesn't take very long for an inspector to inspect the entire property and getting pictures. You may spend a few $1,000s on an inspection report, but that report may come back with gold. You may have found out things that you didn't know. The mechanicals are really old. There's a lot of flooring issues in some properties. There's water damage. There's sewer backups. Whatever that looks like, you need to really be thorough with the physical due diligence. Hopefully they have a drone. You can go up there and take a look at the roofs where you didn't see the roofs at the ground level. Now, it's one of those things where if you're walking a property and you've given an owner a price, and then you come back and you say to the owner, well, Mr. Owner, I didn't see the driveway, or I didn't see those holes in those roofs. It's very hard to retrade on something like that. It's visible. You already have to discount that into your price, saying, I already see this. I need to take this into account into my budget. What you're looking for are things that you don't see. What Jake and I do right now in our properties is we bring out our inspector, who does an impartial inspection. He has his own pictures. He sends us his own report. Make sure that the seller gets it. Make sure that the broker gets it so they can see. And one of those things that's very interesting is if you can pick a day that's rainy, dreary, great time to do an inspection, because if there's rain going on, we're going to see if the rain actually goes through the gutters and it flows away. We're going to see if there's any flooding going on in the property. And those pictures, they always look so, what's the word? They look so dreary. And it's good for you as the buyer because you're like, take a look. This property doesn't look as good. And you see a lot of stuff. The lighting is no good. A lot of these units don't look good. Going in there, inspecting all of the mechanicals is a must. Just understanding with your budget. If you know there's 30 units and 10 of those units need new AC units, well, you got to budget $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 per unit. It's good to know that on the front end. What we also do is we also bring our CapEx crew out there. They're looking at all the mechanicals. They're looking at all of the pipes. We actually go out there and we scope our pipes. One thing I want you to be careful with is older assets. Any assets that are older, built in the 1970s or older, they're gonna have plumbing issues. Looking at those utility bills, seeing where they are, you could probably, if you're experienced, understand that there's leaks going on in the property. Knowing that if and how you can fix them is important. Scoping all the lines, looking at the roofs, looking at the foundations, all really important. Water is the biggest problem on properties. That's where you're gonna get the most damage. Making sure that water runs away from the building and that the roofs are in good working order, it's a must. Understanding the physical due diligence and creating a budget from that, that's what you're trying to do in these 30 days. And making sure if it's realistic within your underwriting to see if you can get to that number. And finally, the third one, the legal. Legal is really tricky and it's difficult for when you're first starting out. And I'll give you an example of my first deal. I bought a triplex years and years ago. I thought it was a fourplex, but legally it was a 3-unit. I had paid it on the value of it being a 4-unit. Now, nobody really said anything for years. The town understood that it was a legal 3, but I was getting taxed as a 4. The banks didn't say anything until the banks started tightening up. And then what happened? I tried to refinance the property and the bank's like, no, this is only a 3-unit. It's not a 4-unit. I lost a significant amount of value. On top of that, all of a sudden I had to expand the septic system that I had in the property. I had to spend thousands of dollars and months of my life to go to the town to make it a legal 4-unit. I probably should have done that before I bought the property to make sure it was legal 4, or I should have had the price dropped to reflect it as a 3-unit. Legal is so important. Make sure if you're buying a 30-unit apartment complex, it's zoned for 30 units. make sure there's means of egress. Make sure when you're going in there, if you're using septic systems, that the septic systems are working properly. Make sure that if you have a water system, in one of my properties, I bought a system that had a well. They didn't have a commercial system in there. They didn't have a chlorinator that was working. The Board of Health, for lack of a better term, crawled up my butt because I didn't have this. They didn't bother the owner before. Why is that? Doesn't really matter. They were concerned when I took the property over. Same thing with fire inspections. Do you have pull stations? Are you required? Do you need sprinkler systems? If you have a third floor, is that third floor legal? One of my properties, I had 3 floors in the building. I bought it, didn't use bank financing, didn't know that the third floor was illegal. When I went to sell it, I had to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to put in a sprinkler system because it was a 3-story building and to put a means of egress. I had to build metal stairs to be able to access and get people from the third floor out of that building. Thousands of dollars with an architect. I had to get variances. Don't get caught up in that. Make sure that you do your legal due diligence as you're doing your physical due diligence so that you know what you're buying. One other thing, when I bought a commercial property, I didn't know that all of the residents needed to have C of Os for each one of their units that were leased. They didn't have C of Os. So when I bought it, I had to go get the C of Os for them. They were already in the unit. I had a resident upstairs that was renting a residential apartment. There was no firewall in between. That apartment was not residential. It could only be used as a commercial or as an office. I lost a tremendous amount of value doing that. So let's recap this real quick. The first one is financial due diligence, receiving rent roll, T12s, possibly some bank statements. You need to verify their income. Then from there, you're going to pass over to the physical due diligence. As you're doing physical due diligence, I would go out there and I would get that inspector on my books scheduled while I'm doing financial. Once I like the financial, let's do the physical. And as you're doing the financial, let's tackle the legal. You only have about 30 days. You need to move. Needs to get done. If you want a copy, once again, of my due diligence doc, email me gino@jakeandgino.com. Now, final words. I got really good with financial and legal and physical due diligence when I started with a coaching program. That's the reality. One of my coaches held my hand. He walked me through the entire deal. If you're going to be in this business for the long term, start trying to create your own personalized templates. Get the one that I'm going to give you and follow it like a checklist. As you're going through the property and going through your due diligence, make sure you hit every single one of these. Give yourself ample time. And if you find an irregularity or something that doesn't make sense to you, just ask the broker. Let them highlight it. Remember, you don't have to buy this deal. Once you do buy the deal, you will inherit everything that's good with the property and you will inherit everything that's bad with the property. Once again, trust but verify. I want to thank you for spending part of your day with me, and as always, I will see you on next week's How To. Take care, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed today's video, be sure to like and subscribe so you'll never miss another episode.